It is Tuesday, May 12th, and I just came home. I spent most of my day out by Coney Island. It's a beautiful day to enjoy the weather, but eventually we'll have to go home because thank God we have a place to live. Um, and I don't normally do podcasts back to back, but an interesting thing happened last night to me. And something that I thought would never happen in my own backyard had has in fact happened. And that was Hamas protesting right here. And I don't normally go to protests because they're pretty much, I don't know if a waste of time is the right word for it, but they're pretty much not usually worth going to. But I figured if I live, only a few blocks away, I figured, what the hell? Let's go check it out. And as usual, the exciting stuff happened after I left. But here's the thing about this. You see, Hamas likes to protest, but most of the protests, and I learned this yesterday, most of the protests are bullshit, are based off propaganda. And I always say in my podcasts, if you tell a lie long enough, people actually believe it. And that's what happens here. And mainly what I was trying, basically what this protest was about. And honestly, I only found out about it uh, through social media. And this protest was actually, it was all out to protest the illegal sale of stolen Palestinian land. After their Manhattan event, the same Israeli real estate agencies are hosting an event in Brooklyn for settlers to buy property in Anglo neighborhoods in Israel on stolen Palestinian land. This discriminatory event is in blatant violation of local, federal, and international laws. We will not be silent as land theft occurs inside our neighborhoods. And they actually built this protest as stop the sale of stolen Palestinian land, bring flags, keffiyehs, and noisemakers. And then on the top it says no settlers on stolen land. Now, this entire post is propaganda bullshit. That's also made up. Because what is discriminatory about it? I don't believe Hamas understand. I don't believe that these protesters or whichever organization is organized it, I don't believe they understand what the word discriminatory means because the way they're using it isn't the way it's described or used. And and the fact that it's saying it's in violation of local, federal, and international laws, I have a question. Under under what laws are they breaking? You say it's stolen Palestinian land, but they can't. But you see, this was the fun part. I finally got a chance to go to the protesting, and I went to the protest, and I literally walked over to one of them, and I asked him point blank, "Can you prove that it's stolen Palestinian land? Can you prove that the land belongs to you?" And they said, they stole Israel from us. I said, "You're answering." I said, "I'm not a real estate agent, nor do I know, nor do I own any land. But I do know that in order to own land, you have to have a deed. So, can you prove that the land that you're claiming is stolen and it belongs to you?" Now, to go to a little backstory here, the Anglo lands that they're referring to are cities in Israel called Sumeria and Judea. The other backstory here is that Israel belongs to the Jews. And it says that in the Old Testament also. Because before Moses died, he wasn't allowed to go into the land of Israel as punishment for what he did years earlier. And so God showed him the entire land of Israel. And that's where And they were making a pilgrimage out of Egypt into the promised land of Israel, which was not called Israel at the time. Now, was there a Palestine? Yeah, there was a Palestine up until 1948 when the Accords were signed. The Israel Accords were signed and they became a state and a nation. And this was done by David Ben-Gurion and Chaim Weizmann. This was in 1948, I'd say about 70 somewhat years ago. And in fact, we celebrate Israel's independence every year on Fifth Avenue for the Israel Day Parade. A parade that I proudly used to march in until about 2 years ago. But, so Palestine did exist. Yes, there's no question about it. There were Palestinians, the Jews, and everything. And by the way, the Old Testament also says that there will never be peace in Israel, regardless of whether or not there's war or not. So, last I checked, in the world, real estate is a legal business that, as long as you have a license to sell real estate, you're allowed to legally sell it. So, I go back to that and I ask them, where is your deed? They're like, we don't need a deed. It's our land and the Jews kicked us out. Okay. And I said, can you prove it? They go, what's the proof? We were a nation. Israel, every time we want to live there, Israel kills us, takes us out. I said, living in a place doesn't mean you own the land either. I said, I live in a co-op. Doesn't mean but I don't own it. I pay rent. I don't own the land that the building is on, because if the building was built on land that I own, then in retrospect, I own the building. And I said, and what laws are they breaking? That's international law, local law, domestic law. First of all, if your issue is in the place that and by the reason why the protest was in my neighborhood was because the real estate convention, the real estate deals, and then the sales were going on in the synagogue that was in that neighborhood. That's in that neighborhood, a synagogue that I've been to many once before. So that's why the protest was taking place. So, and it's interesting. This is propaganda. Most of them don't even know why they protest, but they protest because they believe the lies that they hear, but they don't verify. And I got a couple of pictures that I've since deleted that showed there were like 4 girls there who must have been like teenagers, and and there was one guy there wearing a keffiyeh. They had drums, and then on the other side of that, on the Jewish part, where the Jews were, they're like, why in the world would the cops give a permit for this? I said, because it's freedom of speech. You're allowed to protest. And they're like, not if it's hate speech. And I'm like, no, hate speech. I learned hate speech is freedom of speech. And anyway, if they don't give it, then they become biased. Because if they start giving licenses to protest to, say, other people, like, say, the Jews or the Christians or everybody else, the Muslims will come back, or the Palestinians will come back and say, wait a minute, you said we can't protest because it's hate, but how come they can get the And people understand, if they want us dead, they shouldn't protest. That's not allowed. I'm like, why are you telling me? Tell it to the city. Tell it to the police. Tell it to the police, because protesting is legal in every part of the United States. Protesting is legal, and besides the fact, there were about 400 cops last night, give or take. I think that's the most cops I've ever seen in one place in my entire lifetime, and I live in a very safe neighborhood. So, to see all these cops gathered in one place And none of them were having coffee or donuts, by the way, but they were friendly. And so they were questioning, why are they getting a permit? Why are they allowed to protest? Because, and they go, why can't they protest? I mean, we're allowed to protest. Why can't they? I said, protesting is legal. They go, but they don't like us. Yeah, well, guess what? You don't like them. You don't like them. Granted. But that doesn't mean they have no rights and privileges like us. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And this has nothing to do with whether or not you're a Republican or a Democrat. A lot of people still are very ignorant, or if they don't like it. But yes, protesting is legal. It is a form of free speech. And yes, even hate speech is included in that. And that goes back to what I said yesterday about identity. Identity is who we are, and what you believe, and where you fit in, where you belong. Now, if they believe that this real estate convention is illegal, they'll believe it. If they believe it's violating international law, they'll believe it. If they believe that it's being sold on stolen private land, on Palestinian land, they'll believe it. You can't convince brainwashed people. Same with MAGA and a cult. They'll believe whatever they want to believe, whether or not it's true. Whether or not it's true. And that's actually related to, sadly, this is going to turn into politics, but sadly, this is related to Donald Trump. And here's why. Donald Trump says a lot of things that have no basis in reality, that ultimately it sounds like complete and utter bullshit. And you have people that believe it. Donald Trump has said Democrats are evil, they're demons, and they are destroying this country, and he's putting it back to right. And so, I've been seeing a lot of posts saying Democrats are evil, they're the Democratic Party, oh, they let the immigrants in, Joe Biden's to blame. No, but where are your facts? Facts matter. Facts matter. And the fact that these people in Hamas or Palestinians or the Muslims or whatever they were last night, if they truly believe that the stolen land, I don't care. You could say it's stolen land. I don't really care. And if you believe it, and if you can show me proof that it's stolen land, then I'll 100% back you up. I don't care who you are. If you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Rastafarian, I don't care who you are. You prove to me that it's stolen land or that it's in violation of laws, I will back you up 100%. Jewish or not, I am. I will. Because you're proving to me that it's wrong. But here's the thing. What people don't understand is this has been an ongoing thing for hundreds of thousands of years, and it will go on. Just like anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has existed since the beginning of time. And anti-Semitism will always continue until the end of time. That's just a reality. And who were the first people that began anti-Semitism? Oh, I'd like to believe Cain and Abel, Adam and Adam's kids. And they were both, and the other brother killed the other brother. And I'll tell you what, as painful as it is for me to say this, the fact is that Jews are their own worst enemy. And that is, sadly, a harsh reality of fact. That we are the first people to actually cause our own demise. In fact, yesterday I saw that firsthand when as they moved down the block, and I was going with them only because I was going home. There were a lot of Jews that were instigating the entire thing. And I got it on video. And literally, they were instigating it. And I was like, think to myself, you're going to get us killed. And a lot of these Jews, and I'm not, and a lot of Jews who are young and probably in high school and probably have no idea about the world or any history at all, are the ones that were instigating it. And they don't realize what they're doing because they are taught in Hebrew school or to hate. Because they're taught in Hebrew school that these are the people that ripped open that started October 7th. These are the people that killed us. You agree? Now, you can hate all you want, but there's a time, but A, there's a time and place for it, and B, why even act on it? It just shows everybody why the world hates us. With shit like this that we do. Do you see Christians acting out and telling people, oh, the Jews are evil? And yeah, there might be some people who do that. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying no. But the world looks at us and says, we know we're supposed to be, as Jewish people, we are supposed to set the example for everybody else because the world emulates us. People look up to us and say, we're Jews and we're supposed to be better than that. And then we go and we start this. Yeah, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, I want to go up there just because I want to have fun and just see how it's going to play out. But in reality, I'm like, 400 people, guess who's going to end up getting arrested here? Me. And yes, I'm not going to give you my beliefs on what I believe and what I feel because that's not who I am. And I'm not going to say. And yes, I'm fully aware that Hamas is responsible for October 7th. Does that mean all Hamas people are bad? Absolutely not. And my father once said, every terrorist is a Muslim, but not every Muslim is a terrorist. And that basically means that just because that just like Jews get stereotyped, so do Muslims. But just because you're labeled that way doesn't make it so. Not every Muslim is a terrorist. There are some very good Muslims out there. There are very smart Muslims out there. Somebody once asked me a personal question about Muslims that I refused to answer, but answered cryptically. But I can tell you that it's not stolen Palestinian land. There's no record of that. And anybody listening to this who's a real estate agent knows it's not against the law to sell property in other places. It's actually not. And if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. But as far as I know, there is no. I mean, what are you violating? What are you violating? You're selling property? You're selling property on land I believe is stolen? Okay, if you believe it's stolen, fine. Then show me a proof that you believe it. If you walk into my house and say, I own you're in my apartment, and you're a squatter, so get out. Okay, prove it. Is your name on the deed? Well, technically neither is my name, but yeah. But I it goes back to the identity. I identify as a Jew. Does that but I'm not the perfect Jew and I'm not a good Jew. I'm flawed. Does that make me a very bad Jew? No. Do you think it makes me a bad Jew because I don't follow the rules of the Torah? That's your opinion. Does that make you hate me? Yes? Okay. I'm sorry that I'm not like you. I'm sorry I'm not like him. But we all can't be like you. And we're not all perfect. But that doesn't make me a bad Jew. In fact, you're probably a worse Jew than I am. Because you're criticizing me and you're judging me. And I saw a lot of that last night. That a lot of these Jews that were watching, that were at the protest, were worse than I was because they were screaming obscenities at the Muslims. They were telling them to go back home. They were, first of all, this is their home. They live here, but that's besides the point. And there were some Jews on the other side of the barricade that were really great. They were singing they were singing great songs. They were singing Jewish songs. They were showing proudly they were Jewish. They were showing they were proudly Zionist. And I saw some signs that were also propaganda on the Jewish side, where one sign said, "Anti-Zionist. If you're anti-Zionist, you're for hatred." And I'm like, that's messed up. One is linked to the other. I don't have to like a specific country. If I hate America, does that make me anti-American? If I hate Canada, does that make me anti? Does that make me hate Canada? If I hate, people have their what do we call in Yiddish, their mishigas, their craziness, and they believe it, but it doesn't make it so. Because I'll tell you what, there are oh, there are sects in Israel, and there are sects in Judaism where they don't believe in the state of Israel in its current form. And there are reasons for that. I don't agree with it. Does that make them anti-Zionist? No. But here's another question for you. I have a question. What is a Zionist? What makes a Zionist? And it's a very interesting question. So, a Zionist is a person who supports the movement for Jewish self-determination and the right of the Jewish people to have a sovereign state in their ancestral homeland, which is the land of Israel. Zionism emerged in the late 19th century as a response to anti-Semitism advocating for a safe haven for Jews, which is what basically led to the state of Israel becoming what it is today in 1948. Some of the key aspects of Zionism are self-determination, the foundational belief that Jews are a nation deserving of their own state similar to other nations, which is a fair point because if there are other religions that have their own nation, why can't the Jews? Makes sense, right? The ancestral connection. Zionism emphasizes the historical, cultural, and religious ties Jewish people have to the land of Israel over 3,000 years. Support for Israel. Today, a Zionist generally supports the development, security, and existence of the State of Israel. Evolution. While historically focused on establishing the state, modern Zionism often focuses on ensuring its security and continued existence. There are different types of Zionism. It's not a monolith, because monolith means a belief in one God. There's political Zionism, which focuses on legal and diplomatic efforts to establish strength of state, which is associated with Theodor Herzl. Cultural Zionism, which emphasizes creating a cultural, spiritual center in Palestine. And labor Zionism, which is focused on creating a socialist state, which is influential in Israel's early years. In the context, here we go. Pre-1948, the movement was dedicated to creating a Jewish homeland. Post-1948, the focus shifted to supporting and defending the already established state of Israel. And then there's perjured usage, which is a term is sometimes used unfairly as a political insult, often disguised as anti-Semitism. While Zionism is widely accepted among most Jews worldwide, there have historically been, and still are, some small Jewish groups that oppose it based on religious or political ideologies, which is exactly what I just said. And there are some in the ultra-Orthodox sect of Judaism that disregard Israel, as I said, in its current form. Now, these days, Zionism, when people say Zionist in today's world, they kind of mean it as an insult. But when you call someone a Zionist, if I called you a Zionist, it means someone who wholly supports Netanyahu's government actions in Gaza, illegal settlements in the West Bank, and annexation of Palestinian territories, which is what somebody calls a revisionist Zionist. But the word simply means someone who supports the existence of the State of Israel. And by that definition, one can be against what is happening in Gaza and settlements in the West Bank, support the establishment of a Palestinian state, and be a Zionist. However, there's a lot of long versions here. I'm not going to go through the entire thing here. But, so now we go back to what I said before. The sign that said, if you're anti-Zionist, you're for hatred. However, it's a subject of very intense debate that people are discussing on a regular basis, because many view it as a modern form of anti-Semitism that seeks to erase Jewish self-determination. However, others argue it is a political opposition to a specific nationalist ideology. So let's go and do this breakdown. Viewpoint of anti-Zionism equals hatred or anti-Semitism. Many organizations and individuals, including ADL and World Jewish Congress, argue that anti-Zionism is the opposition to the Jewish right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. It's a form of hatred. Because it is viewed as a focus on elimination of targeting the existence of the State of Israel rather than its policies. Delegitimization. It often denies the Jewish connection to the land and singles out Israel with accusations of apartheid and genocide not applied to other nations. Which actually isn't true, because South Africa was accused of apartheid as well. If anybody's ever seen the movie District 9, that movie essentially is a political movie about apartheid in alien form. And Nelson Mandela went to prison for that. So there's always that. Safety risks. This stance is seen as creating a climate where Jewish people are held collectively responsible for Israeli policies, leading to increased violence. The viewpoint, and now here's another viewpoint. Anti-Semitism, here's a viewpoint, this is the viewpoint on the flip side of anti-Zionism is a political dissent. Others distinguish between hatred of Jews and opposition to Zionism as a political movement. A distinction from anti-Semitism, some, including certain Jewish activists, argue that condemning anti-Zionism is always anti-Semitic stifles debate about Israel government policies. Focus on rights. Anti-Zionists often describe their position as fighting for equality and human rights for Palestinians, opposing the Jewish state's nature as an ethno-nationalist state rather than hating Jewish people. In summary, while many define anti-Zionism as a form of hatred against Jews, aka anti-Semitism, others claim it is a political stance directed at the actions of the State of Israel. Now, it's a very broad topic. It's a very philosophical discussion. So, is it anti-Semitism? Is it the State of Israel? Depending on who you ask. Depending on which viewpoint you see. And the reason why I say that there's a sect of ultra-Orthodox that doesn't believe in the State of Israel in its current form is because it's secular. And they believe that Israel belongs to the Jewish people, and only the Jewish people, and it shouldn't be secular. Which, again, I am not giving an opinion one way or the other, because there's no reason to. Now, it's the same thing with living in America. We, when the Jews are trying to teach their children and live a sheltered life and be closed-minded, great, you can do it if you want. But we live in a secular world. It goes back to what I said yesterday. Why am I using my name Mark instead of my Jewish name? Because am I ashamed of my Jewish identity? Am I ashamed to be who I am? No, I'm not ashamed. But I'm adapting to the world we live in. We live in a secular world. I deal with many people who aren't religious, who aren't even Jewish. So I go by Mark. Mark is my legal name. I'm not doing anything that's illegal. Mark is my legal name. That's exactly what it says on my birth certificate. That's what it says on my passport. That's what it says on my checks. Mark was my name. I'm not ashamed. It doesn't mean I'm ashamed of my Jewish identity. It doesn't mean I'm ashamed to be a Jew, as my identity says. It's the same thing with Israel. It's the same thing. I am smart enough to realize the world we live in. I'm smart enough to realize that my name is adaptable. If I don't have to use a Jewish name in a secular world. If I'm in a town where there's not one Jew, what do I do? Say my Jewish name, and I'm like, who? What? Huh? How do you say that? But everybody knows the name Mark. So if I say that, people know what it means. And if you can't understand that, that's your problem. That ain't mine. And the same thing here. People have a right to live where they want. People have a right to protest. Just because you don't want them protesting, then you know what? Then you run for mayor, you run for police chief, you decide to change the rules, and do whatever the hell you want. But the Constitution is very clear that protesting is a freedom of speech, whether you like it or not. And that's the same thing. Donald Trump doesn't want you protesting because he doesn't want you to have the rights of an American. He wants to tell you what to do. And that's what a dictator does, really. And you have to understand that in a lot of Muslim countries, you protest, they shoot you dead. They kill you. That's what Iran did. That's what Iran did to the protesters. But we're not in Iran. And as long as you're in this country, you have all the rights and privileges. Okay? And I bet you that most of these people who protested are American citizens on the Hamas side. I can guarantee you that. Now that we understand the backstory of this, let's go to the fact is, why do they think this was on stolen land yesterday? And I was there. So I'm telling you firsthand experience of what I experienced firsthand. Based on the reports from the protest that was yesterday, that was last week on Manhattan, at the Parkey Synagogue, which I know very well, including many subsequent protesters, including many Muslims, Palestinians, and allied Jewish activists, believe the great Israeli real estate event was selling stolen Palestinian land for several core reasons. Okay? Now, here's one. Here, a couple of reasons here. Sale of and by the way, I'm reading all this from Google. So my sources come from like Instagram, Al Jazeera. So if you want to check it out, you can. But here's the first part. Sale of occupied territory. The event, organized by My Home in Israel, marketed properties and apartments in illegal Israeli settlements located in the occupied West Bank. Under international law, West Bank settlements are considered illegal, and their presence is recognized as part of an ongoing effort to displace Palestinians. Now, there is some truth to that one because of what's going on in Gaza right now, and Netanyahu trying to destroy Gaza and build settlements there to claim it as Israeli. So there might be some truth to that. Now, I don't know the entire backstory of that, so I'm not going to comment on that, but there might be some truth. Land confiscation and displacement is a second reason. Activists and organizations argue these settlements are built on land seized from Palestinians, often involving the destruction of homes, farmland, and the forced displacement of families who have lived there for generations. Now, this is partially true when the Israelis demolish the homes of, say, terrorists. And what the reasoning is behind that is I don't know, because they can actually reuse those houses and probably use them to put other people in them. So why they didn't raise them, I don't know. It's not something I've ever, really questioned or wondered or know. And number 3, stolen land label. And the word stolen is in quotes Protesters labeled the sales stolen because the land was taken by military force, such as after the 1967 war or through discriminatory and land registration laws, rather than legal, fair market purchase from the original inhabitants. Now, again, the 1967 war was also the war when we got back the Western Wall as well. It was also known as the Yom Kippur War. Now, I wasn't obviously born in 1967, nor was I born in 1968, so my history on this is a little bit fuzzy, so I'm not really going to comment on that, but that basically was what the war was about, reclaiming land that really belongs to the Jewish people. And this is already 1967, so this was already established. They already have the national anthem, and they already have the Israeli army. So this is already like 20 years later. The next reason, discriminatory practices. Reports indicate that these real estate expos often restrict sales to Jewish buyers only, which protesters argue violates international law, American federal fair housing law, and local discrimination laws. Now, that's possibly what they meant in that description that I read earlier on the Facebook post. That's probably what they meant earlier. Again, I'm not into real estate. I don't know if this is true. I don't know that these expos are restricting themselves to Jewish buyers only. Now, if that is true, then I think there's something wrong with that. And you have to ask yourself, is why they're only allowing Jews to buy it? Because if you're claiming it's stolen land, then, you should have a chance to buy your land back. That's only fair. Doesn't matter who you are. But if they're only restricting to Jewish buyers, the question is why? And I don't know, so I'm not going to answer it. Because unlike people in MAGA, I don't try to come up with answers I don't know. I don't try to comment on things I don't have any knowledge about. I'm not Donald Trump. I'll just blurt out answers because I want to give an answer. I generally don't know. Timing amid conflict, protests were intensified because the event took place amid reports of escalating settlement expansion and ongoing violence in the West Bank and Gaza. Well, this is actually true. The Netanyahu's raising Gaza and trying to displace all the Palestinians over there and basically punishing every single person there and then using Gaza to build Israeli settlements in the West Bank. So that is some truth. But to be fair, Donald Trump was okay with this plan. He basically told Netanyahu to go ahead and do it, even though Netanyahu doesn't need his permission to do that. Do I agree with it? I'm not going to comment on whether or not I agree with it because it's not fair to do so. But I will say that there's a lot of truth to this. So maybe it's not just propaganda. And this is why I like doing these podcasts, because I learn about it myself when I'm giving it to you, when I'm giving the information to all of you. And sometimes I just don't know. And again, people need to research, and that's why facts matter. If you don't know something, you ask, or you research it. But as you see, I'm not knowledgeable enough to comment on it any further than what it says over here. But according to this article on Al Jazeera, and I see this sign on this picture has a picture of Jeffrey Epstein on it, and it says, "Free America from Israel." Now, I don't know what that means. I don't even know why there's a picture of Jeffrey Epstein on it, but the picture says, "Free America from Israel." And I have no idea what that means. I assume that Jeffrey Epstein was in the real estate business, so that's probably related to that, which explains why he had a lot of money. But again, I'm not actually sure what that means. But anyway, this is from last week, May 6th, when they protested in Manhattan outside the Parky Synagogue. This is the article that was written. It says about 100 pro-Palestinian protesters have gathered outside a New York synagogue for the second time in 6 months to demonstrate against an Israeli real estate event featuring properties for sale in the occupied West Bank. Counter-protesters were also present outside the venue on Tuesday evening as scuffles broke out between the opposing groups. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators also clashed with police after trying to bypass security barriers and move closer to the synagogue. New York Mayor Mamdani condemned the real estate event A spokesperson for Mamdani told The Intercept that some of the properties being marketed were illegal under international law and deeply tied to the ongoing displacement of the Palestinians. I just want to stop here for a second and say that a lot of Jews are going to take what Mamdani said as saying that he's and prove that he's anti-Semitic because he's a Muslim. And I just want to make something clear about that. Okay, and you can say whatever you want about Mamdani. I don't care. But here's the thing: if he's condemning the event, and you label that as anti-Semitism, then ask yourself: do you really know why? Is that the real reason he's condemning the event, or is there behind-the-scenes stuff that's going on that you aren't privy to? Okay, because that doesn't make him an anti-Semite. Okay? That doesn't make him anti-Semite. Because if it was reversed, if it was a Muslim event that was having the same event, but it was the Muslims running it instead of Jews, instead of Israelis. Okay? And would you protest? If Mamdani condemned that event, would the Muslims say he's anti-Muslim? Okay? Well, actually, that's a bad example. Okay? I'm not going to say whether or not that's anti-Semitic or not. Again, I don't know why. I don't know why he condemned it. I don't know if it has to do with the fact that he might be anti-Semitic. He might be because he had a meaning behind the scenes. It could be many reasons. He's the mayor. Above my pay grade, I don't know why. But can it be labeled anti-Semitic? No. I don't know. I don't know. Yes, I don't know. I'm going to say that. I don't know. Now, he's saying a spokesman not only told the Institute, but some of the properties being marketed were illegal under international law and deeply tied to the ongoing displacement of Palestinians. Now, it might be that they looked into it, and indeed, it is. So he said, he's condemning it. Or he might be an anti-Semite. Yeah, and you know what's funny about this? Just to prove my point, Mamdani rose up through the ranks. He was an assemblyman. Okay, nobody ever heard of Mamdani until he started running for mayor. And every Jewish person out there says Mamdani is anti-Semite. He hates the Jews. You know, he's bad for New York. Blah, and everybody who voted for him, you know, is a blah 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 blah, whatever. And my theory is this: look, you know nothing about Mamdani. You never heard of him until a few weeks ago during the campaign I'm talking about. I don't know Mamdani either. But yet you're screaming out bloody anti-Semitism and saying that he hates Jews. Why are you doing it? Because your leader, Donald Trump, told you to. Why? Because why does Donald Trump hate Mamdani? Because Mamdani won't give in to him. That's why. But how can you hate someone you know nothing about? Based on pure hearsay. And by the way, everyone who's coming out and everyone who says, don't vote for Mamdani, Mamdani will hate you, Mamdani, these are the same people we told not to vote for Trump. And they did it anyway. So they have absolutely no credibility whatsoever. And I said, you hate Mamdani, but what about what Trump's doing? What he's doing is worse than what Mamdani's doing. At least Mamdani's charismatic, and you enjoy talking, and you can hear him speaking. When Trump speaks, all I want to do is go to sleep. Because this is what Trump does. Today, we declared victory in the Iran war. That's a guy with no charisma, no personality. And never cracks a joke, mind you. And they say it's not true. But I don't want to talk about Trump. The point is, you can't hate somebody based on hearsay, because someone else told you to. Which proves the point is that Donald Trump is telling you what to think, what to say, and what to feel. So, as I go back to the article, think about that for a second. Think about the fact is that they're condemning it. But that doesn't necessarily make somebody an anti-Semite. The demonstration was organized by Pal Awad in New York, which staged similar protests outside the same synagogue during an Israeli real estate event in November. Since then, the New York City Council has passed legislation restricting demonstrations near religious institutions. See, now I understand. A lot of Jews complain and say, this is anti-Semitic. Mamdani isn't protecting Jews anymore with this legislation. Well, this just proves that a single person bothers to read. They hear what they want to hear. They read what they want to. They read what they want to read and then take up bits and pieces to put it into a sentence to make it believable. And in fact, speaking of Mamdani, they made it political yesterday. You had people there who were getting signatures to try to remove Mamdani from office, and they came over to me and I said, they already tried this last month in this neighborhood. It didn't work then. It ain't going to work now. Because they had 100 signatures. They actually came to me, and I literally said to them, listen. And I literally told them something, and they said, oh, then this is not for you. Well, first off, I said, let me ask you a question. Do you really think this petition is going to do anything? Because as far as I know, the only person who can fire the mayor is the governor. And I don't think she's going to fire him anytime soon. So what is your goal here? I said, if anything, I would get a petition to remove Trump. And her response to me was, why would you do that when he's doing an excellent job? Think about that for a second. Think about that. And these are Jews who are trying to remove Mamdani. And why the remove Mamdani? When I asked her, why is there a petition to remove Mamdani? Her response was, he's not good for the Jews. I said, that's not really a reason to remove somebody. And I said, do you have proof that he's not good for the Jews? So she goes to me, you voted for Mamdani, didn't you? I said, don't deflect from this, because it's not about me. I'm asking you a serious question. Do you have any proof that he's an anti-Semite? I said, I don't need any proof. He's just bad for the Jews. Can't you see from his actions, from the things he's doing? I said, first off, you do need proof, because you're making accusations. Second of all, do you know what's going on behind closed doors in City Hall? Do you know what's going on behind closed doors of the City Council? Do you bother reading, or do you just talk out of your ass and you see what you want to see? I said, ask yourself a couple of questions. If they're doing certain laws, or they're removing restrictions, does that really make them anti-Semitic? Now, I'm not full disclaimer here. I am not saying he's anti-Semitic, and I'm not saying he is anti-Semitic. I'm having a conversation here. See, and that's what the Jews don't understand, is that when you're speaking when you're defending the person, they automatically assume that you voted for the person. They automatically assume that. No, it's called having a debate. It's called having a conversation and having logical conversations. Okay? Just because you don't like something doesn't make him anti-Semite. I don't like that Trump's the president. Does that mean I'm going to remove him? No, I'll have to wait 4 years. No, because somebody says to me now, do you like the Mamdani's mayor? I'm like, what's the difference? He's already mayor. There's nothing you and I can do to change that until he's up for re-election again. There's really nothing to do about that. And they're like, oh, so you voted for him. I'm like, did I say that? Goes, so then why couldn't you answer the question? I said, I just did. I said, there's nothing I can do about it. He's already mayor. They're like, but you hate Trump. I said, I hate Trump. I hate Trump. And unfortunately, nobody took our warning seriously, and he's in office now, and we have to deal with it. But the repercussions will be with us for the rest of our life. He goes, well, what do you hate about Trump? See, they're quick to defend the person who's known to be a bigot, racist, misogynist, heartless, a sex offender, felon, rapist. But a person they know nothing about, they're criticizing. Do you see the double standard here? Do you see that? And that's a dangerous combination here. They're defending a pedophile, rapist, sex offender, misogynist, racist, bigot, all-around cruel person. But the person they know nothing about, they want out of office simply because they believe he hates Jews because someone told them. Do you see how messed up this is? And this is just Jews. And by the way, Mamdani wasn't targeting us. We wanted to target market. You know what he won? He won for a very simple reason. Because he's smart to know his audience. We weren't his target audience for the vote, for election, for the campaign. His target was the young college people. The first-time voters. Why? Because he is in that category. Because he's the youngest mayor New York City's ever had. Because he's 33 years old. And so he knows the target audience. And that's the audience he wanted. He doesn't want people like me or you. And people don't understand that. And people don't read it. They just see Mamdani and they're like, oh, he's Muslim. He hates the Jews. Well, now you're also stereotyping. Because not every Muslim hates Jews. Why can't they? It's like, oh, he's black. You got something against black people? Not every black person is stupid. There are many black people that are college educated, are CEOs of companies, and are very, very smart. And today, you have a lot of black people who have won many awards. You know, people like Morgan Freeman. Look at LeVar Burton, a black man who was on a groundbreaking historical show, Roots, that years later is now in the Library of Congress as one of the best movies ever made. And not only that, LeVar Burton is known for Reading Rainbow, for teaching kids how to read. Now, if that's a stupid black man, then I don't know what you consider smart. Look at Denzel Washington. Won an Academy Award for one of the best war movies ever, Glory. Does that mean okay? That proves that there are a lot of good black people out there. But and I'm going to say the same thing for Jews and white people. Not every Jew is honest. Not every Jew is trustworthy, and not every Jew deserves to be the title of a Jew. But here we are. So know your audience, educate yourself, research, and fucking read. Because that's what you're doing. And I'm reading now, and I'm reading, and I'm finding things out from reading. Under the new rules, police are required to publish plans establishing buffer zones during protests outside places of worship. And in fact, Jews, including the Jews last night, nobody was allowed to go anywhere near the synagogue. And there were at least 50 police officers patrolling that area, blocking the entrance. Unless you were coming out of that building. So as a Jewish person, we had a buffer zone. We could not be in the street, and we could only be on one side of the street. And that has to be on the side away from the synagogue. In fact, our side of the street we were facing the synagogue across the street. And the protesters were on the other side were on the buffer right perpendicular to us. And they didn't even try to get through the barricade. It only got violent hours later when they moved to the next block over. And you know when that instigated? When a bunch of Jewish high school kids started instigating. And some adults too. I'm not going to single them out. Some adults were also complaining and bitching and yelling and starting fights. And I was backing away while videoing it. And I was thinking to myself, this is not going to end well. And in fact, 4 people did get arrested last night. I just don't know if the 4 were on the Palestinian side or if they were on the Jewish side. Anyway, the event in New York, formerly known as the Great Israeli Real Estate Event, is held in the United States and Canada to help foreign buyers purchase property in Israel and relocate there, aka it's making aliyah, and that's something that Jews do. When they want to move to Israel, they call it aliyah, which means to go forth. And there are a lot of programs out there that actually help you do that, and they give you money to spend to help you go there. And my sister did it, and I did it for about a year and a half. It's not easy. So you move to Israel, and so they're buying real estate over there because a lot of new property is going up, a lot of new development is going up there, a lot of co-ops. But I will tell you, it's not easy to live there. It's not. In fact, and I'm sad to say this, but my father was going to buy real estate there, and he had to decide on something, but for whatever reason, it got too expensive and he just couldn't do it. The same thing with his burial plot. He had a burial plot in Israel. He was going to be buried in Israel. And you know when I found that he wasn't going to be buried in Israel? The day he died. When I found out he wasn't going to be buried in Israel anymore. Why? Because he couldn't afford to, he wasn't paying off the plot. Because it got too expensive and they just couldn't afford to pay it anymore. So he gave up the plot that he had reserved for years and years and years. And now he's buried somewhere in New Jersey. And I miss my father every day. Now, under international law, Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are illegal. While U.S. administrators have condemned the expansions of such settlements, which are seen as a major impediment to a future Palestinian state, they have rarely taken concrete action against Israel's government. Why? I don't know. In a major shift in 2019, U.S. President Donald Trump said Washington no longer considers Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank to be illegal under international law. Again, Donald Trump is doing this to benefit, because to appease, to make the Jews happy, because Donald Trump doesn't do anything unless it benefits him, just like any other narcissist. And Donald Trump knows, and that's why Jews like him, because they say he's for Israel. That being said, that's not a reason to like somebody. What about the other policies? There are issues. You can't vote for somebody else because he's for Israel. What about the other policies? What about what he's going to do for me here at home? What about the economy? What about, education? What about foreign affairs? What about all that? What about domestic stuff? Infrastructure? Well, Israel's all good and everything, but you have to come up with a two-state solution. Even though I said there will never be peace in Israel, you could still have a two-state solution. But and I'm pretty sure this is all Netanyahu is doing, because Netanyahu I once had respect for the guy, and I no longer do. And Netanyahu is the reason why we're in Iran right now. And I'm sorry to say this, but this is fact. This is fact. And there was a whole write-up about it in Vanity Fair. And the only reason why we're in Iran now is because we had smarter presidents who said no, because Netanyahu tried to do this under the presidency of Obama and Biden, and he gave the same presentation he gave to Trump in the situation back in the day when they were president. And Biden and Obama both said no. And it's telling when Donald Trump's saying yes. And it recently came out that Donald Trump has no idea why we went to war. He also said he didn't realize we were still at war. Except he's complaining we have victory, but he's saying we have victory. We're seeing his dementia play out in real time. And more recently, Trump has opposed outright Israeli annexation of the West Bank, which rights groups said is being pursued by increased settlement construction as slave permissive Israeli. However, the U.S. president has not announced any punitive actions against Israel. Washington continues to provide billions of dollars in military and weapons sales each year to Israel. Real estate exports that sell land in the West Bank have been regular flashpoints in the U.S. An Intercept reporter who attended Tuesday's event said the Expo's website referenced Gush Etzion, a cluster of settlements southeast of Jerusalem. One company at the event displayed properties in the settlements of Kfar Avdan. Beyond the settlements being in violation of international law, activists in the past have charged that organizers of the events run afoul of U.S. domestic law. Rights groups have long maintained that Israeli settlements in effect bar or severely limit non-Jewish residents, making the sale of properties inherently discriminatory. Well, if that's true, then they could be right. If that's true. On top of that, activists have accused the groups running the real estate expos of religiously screening who they allow into the events. Again, I don't know if it's just true or not, but if that is true, then yeah, they are. Then they do have a valid argument that it is discriminatory and pretty racist or bigotry. So if that is true to it, I don't know if that's true, but if it is, then they do have some credibility to that argument. In fact, here is a committee saying just that. Not only is the refusal to sell property to anyone based on their race or national origin unlawful, the properties involved in these sales are built on stolen Palestinian land, according to the American Arab Anti-Discriminatory Committee, saying in a statement in 2024 as it lodged a complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Justice against the expos. That year, the New Jersey Civil Rights Division reportedly questioned the organizers of an expo in West Orange, New Jersey, after they said they were asked to provide detailed information on their religious affiliation, including the synagogue they attend and the name of their rabbi. And again, that's unheard of in any real estate document, because most real estate usually just want a background check and a deposit, and maybe some identification. But asking for your religious affiliation and rabbi or priest or whatever, yeah, that is a kind of illegal to do. That is a stereotype, and that probably isn't, and that's a violation of civil rights. And yeah, that I have issues with. In fact, this statement, there's a picture of Ben Gvir, and under the caption it says, Ben Gvir dreams of news and video posted to TikTok, and that is on Al Jazeera, and that is actually racist to say about a Jewish person. So I have issues with that as well. But anyway, to finish the article, there were no specific public allegations of such screenings by the organizers of the Great Israeli Real Estate event on Tuesday. Immediate contact for the organizers was not immediately available, although their website maintained that the expos are private, invitation-only events, which is actually a thing, by the way. That is, in art galleries, it's the same thing. By invitation only, it's a private gallery, private showings, or by appointments only. That is actually a thing, not just in the Jewish world. I've seen that myself. During Tuesday's expos at the Barkey Synagogue on Manhattan's Upper East Side, Jewish Voice for Peace accused organizers of intentionally holding the event at a religious site. In a post on X, the group said the move gives the appearance of the protests being anti-Jewish as opposed to being against the sale of properties on occupied land. The JVP said the event is racist, exclusionary, and perpetuates the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Yet again, these events are attempting to cynically shield themselves from protests by holding the sales at synagogues. No one should enable the sale of stolen land, let alone a religious institution. Several local lawmakers condemned the pro-Palestinian protesters, including State Assemblyman Mika Lasher, who said their demonstrations were intended to create fear in the hearts of Jewish New Yorkers and stigmatize our community. Hey, I didn't even know about this event until somebody posted on Facebook. And holding it in a synagogue is their right. They have the right to hold it anywhere they want. Just like you go to just like art auctions can be held anywhere. They can be held in an auction house, someone's private apartment, a studio, an art gallery. Just like you can put a wedding. I can have a wedding anywhere I choose to. I don't need permission. If I want to put it in a lot of wedding ceremonies are done in churches. Does that mean people are gonna? What about the people who can't go to a church? They can't go to they can't go to the ceremony. Or what if they can't go because there's no kosher food there? You can't please everybody. Not everybody's going to. You can't. No one's going to win. Not everybody can be pleased. Several local lawmakers condemned the pro-Palestinian protesters, including State Assemblyman who. Okay, I read that part. Basically, it's a he said, she said. This is an ongoing fight. Breaking the law, not breaking the law. We're allowed to do it. We're not allowed to do it. I just want to make this protest. I just want to make sorry. I want to make sorry. I didn't want to. I want to make this podcast to tell you that this happened in my own neighborhood, and people are protesting, and I just wanted to make this podcast to make it clear that our Jews on both sides, Democrat and Republican, anti-Israel or for Israel, and the Israeli Day Parade is coming up, and I do have VIP passes, and I do plan on going, and you're going to get protesters there too. They're going to people like in Turi Katra who are going to protest the parade. People are going to say that we're celebrating stolen land, that we stole Palestine. And look, you want Palestine? As they're going to say, go to Ohio, East Palestine, New Ohio. And there's actually and in East Jerusalem, Palestinians live in East Jerusalem, so they can go there and live. They should have their own land. I'm all for it, and I'm all for a two-state solution. But it's not as easy as people think it is. And I don't talk about it because I don't have a solution. I don't know how to make a two-state solution where both parties can live in peace with each other, because we'll never have peace. But but Hamas is an organization. Hamas is not the people. Hamas is a terrorist organization. But not everybody is a terrorist. Few bad apples doesn't make an entire religion bad. Same thing with Judaism. A few bad apples in Judaism does make the entire religion bad. Am I happy being Jewish? Yes. Do I think I can be a better Jew? Absolutely. Do I improve myself every day? Well, I try to, but it's not hard, but it's not easy. But I'm admitting that I'm flawed. I'm admitting that I'm not perfect. I'm admitting that I'm admitting that. Do I speak negatively about my own religion? I do. But who doesn't? But am I going to protest based on what I believe to be lies? No. Am I going to comment on something I don't know? No. Whether or not this is illegal or not, whether or not this expo was illegal or not, is up for discussion, as I proved. It's up for debate, as I proved. It's not my place to say, because you're going to get different opinions from different people. You're going to get different answers from different people. And this is an ongoing debate that's been going on for centuries, for years, and it's never going to end. It's a never-ending battle. So everybody should just agree to disagree, let it play out. Eventually, it'll work itself out. Until then, we're going to have these protests. Until then, we're going to have these sales of land. And until then, the world's going to continue being the way it is. And this is the way God intended it to be, whether we want it or not. Eventually, it'll play itself out. We may all be dead by the time it does. But this is the beauty of history. It runs its course. And in due time, and just like things change over time, so too will this. We learn to adapt and we learn to accept. And we accept the things we cannot change. And it becomes norm. So let people protest, let people hate each other, but it doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. However, a world of peace can't exist either. Because if the world existed and it was all peaceful all the time, the world would collapse. In my opinion. So let the chips fall where they may, and educate yourself. It's important that people educate themselves, because if we go and make asinine comments and we start hating people based on ignorance and based on false accusations, then history will continue being repeated, and we'll all be doomed, and the circle will never end. And we're seeing that play out now in real time. History repeating itself because of ignorance, because of stupidity, and because of hatred. And until we change the way we live, and as they said, come on everybody now, smile on your brother, everybody get together and try to love one another right now. You know that song? Come on, everybody now. Smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. And that was a protest song. And in the 60s, you had a lot of those. And when we love each other and we learn to accept and we ask questions, we will have less hate. Because if we don't ask questions, we don't learn. And if we don't learn, we don't know nothing. And if we know what we know, or if we know what we think we know, but we don't want to educate ourselves, then this happens. And that's why facts matter. And as Mark Twain said, if you're going to distort the facts to how you want them, you can do whatever you want, but understand the facts first. And like I just did now, I didn't know most of the stuff until I read it now with you guys. And now I know it raises more questions than answers. And that's why I keep going and going and make myself a better person. Because I'm constantly learning and asking questions. And asking questions. And my father once said, the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. And even if you believe it's a stupid question, asking questions is how we learn. And how we learn is how we grow. And how we grow is how we become a better person. And I'm always working on ourselves. I believe we can all work on ourselves. And I believe working on ourselves will help us understand each other better and the world around us.